Aloha, jazz lover, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another Jazz Intersection interview. For this interview, we have the pleasure of speaking with saxophonist, composer, educator, and the leading voice in Indian jazz fusion music. That's Mr. George Brooks. Aloha, George, and welcome to the Jazz Intersection.
Thank you very much, James. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure having you. I really enjoy your new CD, Spirit and Spice. And but before we get into talking about that CD, and we will, give us a short bio on George Brooks.
A short bio. Let's see.
Yeah.
Born in New York City, raised outside of New York City on Long Island, and kind of grew up listening to pop music of the day until I was in my early teens, about 14. Somebody, I think, played me a recording of Thelonious Monk and another one of John Coltrane. And I was playing saxophone. I started playing saxophone at about age 10 in the school band. Still playing kind of school band repertoire. And but this young woman who played piano in my junior high school, turned me on to Thelonious Monk. And being that I lived just outside the city, we started going to, especially the Village Vanguard, to hear real live jazz. And in those days, it wasn't so hard for a teenager to get into a jazz club. So I'd go down to the Village Vanguard, hear people like Bill Evans. I'd often go hear the Fat Jones, Mel Lewis Big Band, McCoy Tyner, Betty Carter, Rahsaan Roland Kirk.
Wow.
Great musicians there as a youngster. So it was very, it was very inspiring, and kind of inspired me to try to learn on my own. I didn't have a real great teacher as a youngster, and I went off to college for a little while and started playing what was then for me professionally in upstate New York, playing kind of in a funk band, but still trying to learn some jazz theory on my own. But I left school, I came back to New York, and since the Village Vanguard was kind of my stomping grounds, I went there to see who from the Fat Jones, Mel Lewis band might teach me, and I got involved with Frank Foster, who was great tenor saxophonist and arranger for the band. Later went on to lead the Basie band. So he gave me my first kind of real jazz instruction, and from there I went on to the New England Conservatory, which had one of the first jazz programs at that time, and so I got associated with people like George Russell and Jackie Byard, and Jackie Byard's big band. We had a steady gig in Boston every Wednesday night. So that was kind of the basis for kind of my jazz education. But while at the conservatory, I took a course in Indian music, to just kind of study.
Yeah.
Just kind of on a lark. But when I heard it, it kind of had that same impact that hearing John Coltrane had. So I immediately started trying to figure out, okay, what can I do with this music? How can I incorporate it into the saxophone? How can I make it part of my personal musical statement?
That's an interesting statement that you just made, that it had an impact like John Coltrane's music. Kind of give us a little enlightenment on what you mean by that.
Well, I felt kind of the same level of improvisational depth as well as kind of this spiritual content that in Coltrane's music. So they both made a lot of sense to me that way. I mean, it was super highly evolved as an improvisational form, and yet it had this deep kind of spiritual core. So, I just really felt a strong relationship between Coltrane, who I was becoming, very fascinated with, maybe obsessed with, and then particularly there was a flutist named Hari Prasad Chaurasia, who was this, could kind of do on the bamboo flute what Coltrane was doing on the saxophone.
Wow.
A lot of real melodic intricacy, and that spiritual depth and power. So that kind of brought that into focus for me, although I didn't really know what it was about. And I came out to California. I was kind of chasing my girlfriend, who's now my wife. She was studying in a place called Mills College, where there was this great Indian vocalist teaching named Pandit Pranath.
Mm-hmm.
She wound up getting a fellowship to study in India, and I went with her, and we lived in 1980 and 1981 in New Delhi, studied classical music very seriously, learned to speak Hindi, learned really kind of the ins and outs of the culture there, and it was that pretty much fixed it for me.
Mm.
And it's been kind of a lifelong passion since then, kind of studying and expressing the music of the American jazz tradition along with the Indian classical tradition.
All right. So that has to do with your 1980 extended trips to India?
That was the first trip there, and then there was this subsequent one in the kind of in the mid-'80s, again extended. Then we started having babies, and I didn't go to India as freely. And in about 2001, I started going back regularly as a performer. I had kind of the opportunity here, because I live in Northern California, to associate with some very wonderful Indian classical musicians. The great sarod player Ali Akbar Khan started a college here in Northern California. So many classical Indian musicians kind of gravitated to this area.
Mm-hmm.
There's a sitarist named Krishna Bhatt, who I used to work with very regularly with the American composer and pianist Terry Riley. And then the great tabla master Zakir Hussain also lived in the area. And then in the mid-'90s, I recorded my first record for his label, which is called Moment Records. And